we got Duels in Brawl Stars, and it's awesome. And I've got not 3, not 4, not 6, but 5 amazing tips for Duels that you need to know when building your team compositions. Because when it comes down to it, your team is the most important thing in Duels. I mean, obviously, you just gotta play good in the actual rounds, but I can't really help you with that. So I'm gonna tell you the best way to compose your team, everything you need to think about. You have to watch until the end of the video because you'll only be able to make the best team if you take into account everything in this video. That leads us to the first thing, which is that you always want 2 brawlers in a row to be completely different types of brawlers. You want the brawler that comes second to counter the counter of the first brawler. So basically what I mean by that is if you're running like a Piper, the things that Piper loses to are usually like assassins who can get close to her really easily, or depending on the map, if it's like a really close range map, maybe just some normal mid-range brawlers could easily take her out. So for your second brawler, do you just want to run another long-range sharpshooter brawler? No, because if you lost with Piper, that means you're going to lose with the second brawler. So you want to have a completely different brawler in that second slot if your first brawler is Piper, so that way you have a chance at countering whatever countered Piper in the first place. And that'll give you the best shot of just not completely getting swept by one of your opponent's brawlers that happens to work well against your first 2 brawlers. Sometimes you'll get unlucky and just have a really bad game the first time, and they didn't actually beat you with something that was good against your brawler, and so then your second pick also won't be good against what they have, but that doesn't happen too often, and it's a better bet just to try to shake up the type of brawlers you're using in that order. Theoretically, the first and third brawlers could be the same, but the second brawler needs to counter the counters of the first, and the third brawler needs to counter the counters of the second. You got all that? Good, because I'm not going to go over it again. That's why you're able to rewind in YouTube. Next up, you want to think about the ordering of your gadgets. Typically, if there are some gadgets that are worse than others in your comp, you want to put the brawlers with those gadgets later, because obviously you want to use your gadgets when they're the best. And so if you put the best gadget brawlers first, you're less likely to just panic waste a gadget in the heat of the moment with some other brawlers where the gadget's not that useful. And the gadgets that you do use in the first couple rounds, well, you'll get a lot more value out of it. And then once you know that you won't need any of those super valuable gadgets later on in the duel, then you'll have the worst gadgets to do whatever you want with and you don't have to worry about it. Whereas if it was flip-flopped, maybe you could use a worse gadget at the beginning of the duel, who knows? What if you need all 3 of those super OP gadgets in the last duel to help you win? You wouldn't know unless you put that good gadget brawler first. Now, if there are some brawlers that you're just not going to use gadgets on ever because it's basically useless in duels, you can put those first and just tell yourself don't use any of the gadgets, so that way I can save them for the better gadgets later on the duels. That also works. Next thing you want to think about isn't actually related to winning duels, but if you are pushing trophies with duels, you want to put the brawlers that you want to get more trophies with first, because when it splits up the trophies and it's not divisible by 3, it'll typically give them to the brawlers in order of how you played them in the duel. So the most trophies are going to go on the first brawler, and so if you want to push a brawler really high, it's better to put them in the first slot. It is only a 1 trophy difference, which doesn't sound like much, but if you're playing 20, 30, 40 of these duels to push a lot of trophies on your brawlers, that's going to be that many trophies more that you're getting on the brawler in the first spot rather than the brawler in the last spot in your team composition. But 2 more things you need to think about, both of which are extremely important. First, you have to think about how quickly each of the brawlers can charge their super. Some brawlers like Terra take actually forever to charge their super, and so you can make those brawlers get a lot more value if you play a brawler that can really easily charge up their super right before them, because the supercharge carries over in between matches. So brawlers that really easily charge their super are Daryl and Edgar, because they automatically charge it. Buzz can easily charge it up. I'm not sure if the gadget super carries over. Haven't tested that yet, but if it does, then that would be really good. Just make sure that if you are about to lose, you don't panic use your super, so that way you can get as much value out of that super as possible and convert it to the next round where the brawler can hopefully do more with it. So if you ever want to try to use a brawler, it takes a while to use their super, always make sure to put a brawler that can easily charge their super right before it. Or you can just play a bunch of brawlers that all charge their supers really quickly. Also a possible option. And I also want to tell you guys some examples of putting these things into practice at the end of the video. But before that, I want to tell you about one more tip that you want to use in-game when doing duels. And that is to just be patient in every sense of the word, right? There are 2 main ways you need to be really patient in the game. First is if you're ever playing a brawler that just sort of gets outranged or will basically lose in an open setting, hide behind a wall and literally just stay there. You can wait as long as possible for the gas to come in, because that's going to close off the map and make it possible for you to win against long-range brawlers even if you don't have that same range. And it's possible to win really bad matchups this way, so don't think like you've automatically lost it at the very start of the game just because you get outranged, because it's perfectly possible to win a game by taking advantage of the gas, just being really patient and not putting yourself in danger until the moment where you actually have a chance to win, when the gas is closed in enough. And then of course the other thing you have to be patient with is when to use your supers and your gadgets. Like I was talking about before, you always need to be thinking about how your next brawler is going to do against their next brawler. And if you think your super or your gadget's going to be really key in that matchup, or it's going to really easily get you a win, then just save it. Sometimes it's a lot better to just accept a loss and not take on what might be a really hard matchup and invest all your resources into that, because you'll just have a better chance of winning if you just move on and keep your super and keep your gadgets remaining. So this is something you always want to be thinking about. Sure, there's like the 1v1 matchups and the juking and the aiming you have to think about, but on top of that, the main thing you need to focus on is what you're going to do if you lose that match and you're forced to play your next brawler against whatever they're playing. Or you win that match maybe and your opponent throws up their next brawler. Are you still going to be able to win with the resources you have left? It's all about that end game, because it's not just about winning one battle at the beginning. You got to make sure you get through every single brawler of your opponents. So if there's anyone that causes a problem, you got to make sure you have the resources to deal with that. With that out of the way, I want to mention some of the best brawlers for this mode. There's like a bunch of different categories, I think, for duels that the brawlers are going to fall into. There are the long-range sharpshooter brawlers like Piper, Belle, Nani. Those are all really good ones for duels. Bea and Brock, also long-range, maybe not as good in certain situations, but against some matchups they will be good. Then you've got your chip brawlers, who are also pretty long-range, who don't do much damage, but you prevent your opponent from healing, you force them back into their spawn, and then eventually might even get close enough to actually do a decent amount of damage and finish them off. This is going to be like your Jean, your Spike, even Gale. I think he's a bit underrated in duels, and I guess just throwers in general are very chip-like brawlers because they don't do too much damage, but every time you hit your opponent, you prevent them from healing, and you just have a ton of area control with your attacks. You've also got brawlers that just do really well with their super and are kind of super reliant. These are going to be the ones, like I said before, where you want a brawler before them who can charge their super really easily. This is going to be like Terra, Meg, of course, because without your super, Meg is going to be really tough to win with against some of the other good duel brawlers. Maybe even some melee brawlers like El Primo or Bull, who can just jump in once they have their super. Another group of brawlers is going to be your assassins, right? Your Edgars, Mortis, Buzz, even Stu, I guess, can count as an assassin. Crow too, he can jump and he's sort of a chip brawler as well. All of these groups of brawlers have other groups that they counter, so generally you want to select something from each of these different groups, so that way you'll have answers to whatever your opponent brings. You don't want to pick everything from the same group, because those will all likely get countered by the same brawlers, and so if your opponent has that brawler, they're just going to sweep you and be done with it. So you could take two brawlers from the same category, like two long-range brawlers is a perfectly fine strategy, but I recommend, like I said before in the video, putting them first and third, so that way if they counter your first brawler, you'll have a chance with your second brawler to get rid of that from their team before you bring out your third sharpshooter brawler. And essentially who you choose from these brawlers is going to be mainly dependent on the map. Choosing two sharpshooters is great as long as you have an open map. If it's a more closed map, choosing two from that category probably isn't the best idea, and maybe you want to go more for assassins or for some brawlers that I didn't talk about who are just sort of like mid-range DPS brawlers. We haven't really seen many duel maps that they'll be good on, but I'm sure there will be some eventually. So that's basically all I got for you. Once again, so excited that duels are out. It's definitely about time. And hopefully with these tips, you can go and noodle on your opponents with some busted comps.